When a shopper places an order, you have one shot at winning them as a lifelong customer. I'm Al Coe, CEO of ShipStation. I'm obsessed with ShipStation being the most reliable and efficient way you can ship. At ShipStation, our promise is to make shipping easier for e-commerce business owners. We're focused on providing the most integrations with all the places you sell and automating manual tasks to make fulfillment easier for your team. We partner with all the major carriers to make sure you get the lowest possible rates because every dollar counts. So no matter what you're sending or where you're shipping to, ShipStation can get it there fast and keep your customers happy. See for yourself how ShipStation can reduce the time and effort you spend on order fulfillment. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist, because we're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Blowing a hole in Trump's trade war as Elon walks away. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
All the news you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. Going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump back in early April proclaiming Liberation Day, announcing sweeping tariffs on countries all over the world, including Canada. Well, today, so much for that. Because yesterday, a little-known federal court in New York called the U.S. Court of International Trade put a stop to much of Trump's tariff policies, including ruling that the U.S. president exceeded his authority. Within minutes of the ruling, White House officials vowed to appeal. Obama-era advisor David Axelrod said the ruling creates havoc.
You know, Trump loves tariffs. We know that. He thinks it's a cure-all for all of America's problems. It will, raise revenues. It'll bring jobs flowing back here, manufacturing jobs. It will restore American respect and balance in the way, all of this. But, in a weird way, I mean, in the short run, I think it creates a lot of havoc because everyone's trying to figure out when this, in the long run, it could save him from himself because these tariffs are bad economic policy, and these tariffs could raise costs on Americans. They're already starting to. So if the result of it is he's stymied in doing something that's going to raise costs for people, it may be a black eye, but it may also be a break for him.
So what does this mean for Canada? Not much. This ruling deals with the 10% global baseline tariffs and the fentanyl-related tariffs that were imposed under the U.S. International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But tariffs imposed using a different legal tool called Section 232, they still stand. And they include tariffs on autos, steel, and aluminum. They are unaffected by this ruling. Speaking in the House of Commons, where MPs are debating the throne speech, Prime Minister Carney said he was pleased by the ruling, but added that the fight against Trump's tariffs isn't over.
The government welcomes yesterday's decision by the U.S. Court of International Trade, which is consistent with Canada's long-standing position that the U.S. IEEPA tariffs were unlawful as well as unjustified. That said, we recognize that our trading relationship with the United States is still profoundly and adversely threatened and affected by similarly unjustified 232 tariffs against steel, aluminum, and the auto sector, as well as continuing threats of tariffs against other strategic sectors, including lumber, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals.
This is the latest blow to Trump on his signature trade policy, tariffs. Yesterday, Trump teed off on a news reporter who asked Trump about a new term that is apparently making the rounds on Wall Street, the taco trade, TACO, or Trump always chickens out, coined by a columnist from the Financial Times. This is how that played out during an Oval Office news conference.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country, and because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? Because we have $14 trillion now invested, committed to investing when Biden didn't have practically anything. This country was dying. You know, we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. I went to Saudi Arabia. The king told me. He said, we have the hottest country in the world right now. 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that.
In addition to Trump's tariff policy being wrapped in uncertainty now, the U.S. president is also losing one of his most loyal supporters. Mega billionaire Elon Musk is leaving the Trump administration, where he was officially called White House senior advisor, but was closely linked with DOGE, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk has been doing a series of interviews in the last week or so, including a sit-down with CBS News that will air this Sunday morning. In that interview, Musk says the president's big, beautiful bill, that's Trump's latest budget bill, undermines the work of his DOGE team.
So, I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the DOGE team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along. I mean, everything he's done on DOGE gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both. My personal opinion.
Musk has said he wants to focus more on running his businesses on his social media platform, X. Musk said he wants to be super focused on X, XAI, and Tesla. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Well, he's my friend on the right side of things. With us every Thursday is Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Welcome back.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm good. So you're in the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and that is actually where the national political spotlight shifts to today. Prime Minister Mark Carney was in the House of Commons this morning, part of the debate on the speech from the throne, but he is scheduled actually within the hour to be in your fair city for a meeting with your city's mayor, Olivia Chow, and there's going to be some kind of announcement about, quote, working together to build more homes, get Toronto moving, and fight rising costs. Mm-hmm. Maclean's once declared that Olivia Chow, mayor of Toronto, was Canada's most powerful political figure. Now, some might debate that, but they named her that because of her ability to extract concessions from the federal government. Olivia Chow, NDP royalty, was married to the late Jack Layton, of course.
Correct.
Is up for re-election in your city next year. What are her chances?
Poor. To
Poor?
be perfectly
Really?
honest.
Wow.
Very, very poor. And, it's Maclean's is unfortunately not, without being rude, not the publication it used to be. This is not the days when there was Bob Lewis, Jeffrey Stevens, or even my friend Ken White behind the scenes, where, you had various liberal and conservative ideas that were prevalent in Maclean's, but at least it sort of took a kind of a sensible measure. Looking at Olivia Chow and declaring her that, which I thought was laughable at the time, I still think it's laughable when you mentioned it, that she was Canada's most powerful figure. I mean, if you want to use, say, or make the argument, say, that because of the strong mayor powers that Ontario Premier Doug Ford gave to Toronto and Ottawa, that would technically mean that Mark Sutcliffe is on the list as well. And as much as I like Mark Sutcliffe and worked with him for many years alongside you, I don't think he would regard himself in that kind of level, even though he has a power as a mayor that's much, much larger than most. Olivia Chow is certainly one of the most visible mayors in the country. There's no question of that. And you're right. I mean, she obviously was an NDP stalwart for a long time. She was married to the late Jack Layton, as you correctly pointed out. She was an NDP MP as well, and at one point was considered a strong candidate for the leadership of the NDP, but ultimately chose not to do it, which is interesting because you would think that the NDP would probably be in a better situation right now and not the mess that they're under with the now departed or about to depart Jagmeet Singh as the leader. Can she get a lot of influence out of the government? She certainly tries to hold her hand out and get as much as she possibly can. She certainly built bridges with former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mr. Ford in Ontario. But in terms of regarding her as powerful, no. Influential, not really. And popular, no. I mean, I think that as long as in the next mayoral election in Toronto, Rob, as long as there aren't too many candidates running against her, like there was in the by-election that occurred before, and I'm sure we can talk about some of the candidates or possible candidates, I think that as long as it's a short list and there's certainly one person who's somewhere on the right, center-right, one person who is somewhere on the liberal side of things, and not too many other contenders, I think her chances of being reelected are extremely poor.
Well, let's talk about what's in the rumor mill. I read in the last week or so, people are trying to woo John Tory to make a political comeback. I mean, the reason Olivia Chow is the mayor is because he was snared in a sex scandal, I'll call it. He had an extramarital affair with somebody who worked for him. Okay, and he resigned. I was like stunned by that. Holy smokes. It's no secret that Marco Mendicino, who is Mark Carney's current chief of staff, but not long for the job, has ambitions and wants to take a shot at running for mayor of Toronto. So what do you think of those two?
Well, I mean, John Tory, unfortunately, it's interesting. His reputation should have been completely sullied based on what happened, where you're quite right. It was a whole sex scandal with a younger woman in his office, and the whole thing was a complete and utter mess, and really, in fact, destroyed his legacy. I mean, had he finished his term that Olivia Chow is now currently serving, he would have been the longest running and reigning mayor of this city in history. I'm sure that he would like to obviously correct the record, fix his name, tidy up his reputation, and maybe take another crack at it. Wouldn't shock me if he ran, and wouldn't shock me if a lot of Torontonians were willing to forgive him and basically pick him again. That wouldn't be a surprise. Marco Mendicino is interesting. I've heard the same thing too. Again, wouldn't be surprised if he is the liberal who runs. And although John Tory is kind of, I don't really regard him as much of a conservative, and that's nothing personal against him. I've known him many years, and I get along with him. But ideologically, he used to fit in as what we would call a red Tory or a left-leaning conservative at one point. But now it's kind of hard to figure it out. I'll put him on the right to be nice, but I don't know where he fits in anymore. But if those two turn out to be the main contenders and challengers for Olivia Chow, then her goose is definitely cooked at that point, Rob. So we'll see what happens. But those two would definitely have a shot at it.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk about a former mayor of Toronto, Rob Ford, the late Rob Ford, the quote-unquote crack-smoking mayor of Toronto. They're going to do a Netflix series about him, and it's going to be on Netflix next month, called Trainwreck, Mayor of Mayhem. Ask Michael about that when we come back. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
I remember getting a call from this guy who said he had a video of Ford smoking crack. It was April Fool's Day, which is never the day you want to get a call like that. But yeah, I mean, I handled it as professionally as I could and said, okay, well, tell me more. So we met at a parking lot. I remember that they wouldn't let us hold the phone. Like they were holding the phone, kind of showing it to us. But when the screen turned on, it was just so obvious that it was Rob Ford.
Here with Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. That is from the trailer for a Netflix documentary series that will be on that streaming service next month called Trainwreck, Mayor of Mayhem. Now, Michael, I don't know what kind of treatment Rob Ford is going to get in this series. I will certainly be glued to it when it comes out. I'll binge it probably all in one evening. But the reputations of politicians usually improve over time, especially after they die.
Yep.
Has that happened to Rob Ford in Toronto? What would you say?
Yes, to some degree it actually has, because I think a lot of time has passed. And because when things start to settle down and, Mr. Ford, who has passed away, is obviously not mentioned in the news as frequently. We see obviously his brother, Doug, who's the Premier of Ontario, but we obviously don't see as much of Rob any longer, which is understandable. Certainly there are people who remember that period of time, and it was a frustrating one. It was obviously something that, Canada could live without having coverage of, and Ford himself could have lived without it. Now, to be fair, Rob Ford and his brother Doug did appear on American TV like Jimmy Fallon and other talk show hosts and played it up to some degree and tried to take advantage of it. But when that video came out, that was pretty devastating overall. It really showed that there were a lot of demons and personal problems that Rob Ford was facing. And look, to his credit, he went into rehab. He worked hard, and there's always the discussion that he beat the habit, so to speak. But then, unfortunately, he got cancer, and it eventually killed him. But I think his reputation is certainly better than it was years ago. There's less coverage of it now. But the Netflix documentary, which quite frankly I don't think is going to be very positive, will obviously bring it all back and sully it to some extent.
It just seems to me, when I looked at Rob Ford, especially during those turbulent times, you see someone who's battling addiction.
Yes.
And the left, especially in your city, I mean, it expresses so much empathy and sympathy for those with drug addictions, right? And says, oh, look, these people are sick. They're not bad people. There was never an ounce of sympathy from the political left in Toronto for Rob Ford.
Not in the
It was, this guy's a buffoon, this guy's a clown, this guy's an idiot, It was all of that and more. Yeah. That was
you're
my
right.
take.
And unfortunately, that's the nature of it. It's very two-faced. And you're quite right. I mean, what you pointed out is accurate. And it's not because I'm saying it because I'm a conservative. If you actually go back, you can use Google search. You can look up articles. You can look up interviews that were done on radio and TV, discussions, political panels, and so forth. It was almost universal that way. And look, I admit that I was frustrated by it too. And I was, concerned that basically all the good work they had done getting him into office, and the first year or two, which was actually quite successful in the way he handled things with the private sector. He was able to deal with public sector unions, garbage collection, changed its whole density. And it was quite interesting what he did. and he actually did a lot of positive things, but his drug addiction and his personal demons caught up with him.
Yeah.
Again, though, I mean, I don't have anything against Netflix making these documentaries, because in the end, we live in a democracy, we live in a free society. The good, the bad, and the ugly of any public figure can obviously be discussed, but I hope that it's not too vicious and too nasty against him, because he really did not deserve that.
Talk soon, Mike. Bye-bye.
The Newsday panel.
The gang's all here for a Thursday Newsday panel. Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist and commentator. How are you today, Neil?
I'm fantastic, Rob. How you doing?
I'm just fine, thanks. Chris Day, Senior Vice President at Hill and Knowlton. Welcome back, Chris Day.
Thank you, and nice to speak to you both.
So Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, made his debut in question period yesterday. We have a little bit of question period from yesterday. Roll the tape.
The PM said undoing the damage of the last 10 years would require great speed, but he's not going to table a budget for 6 months. If he's the man with the plan and the guy you hire in a crisis, why won't he table a budget before he goes on summer vacation?
Mr. Speaker, I understand the member of the opposition is very busy. Didn't have a chance to study closely the 100-day plan of the former member from Ottawa, Carleton, which did not include a budget. Our plan includes legislating for one Canadian economy and nation-building projects immediately to grow this economy, and we expect the support from all in this House.
Okay. How did he do, in your opinion, Chris Day? How did Mark Carney do with his debut in question period?
Well, I think he did fairly well, but I mean, he and his team were also not setting expectations very high. It was kind of reminiscent of the leaders' debates, frankly, where, he was walking in as a new politician to a new setting, new format, where he's not really been tested in English and in French. And, I think they purposely set the bar quite low in terms of expectations, so it's easy to step over said bar. Yesterday there were some folks that were, trying to get the stakes on his first QP higher, and I think the team around Mr. Carney, first off, set the bar lower again, but also did their job in prepping him for the setting, and I think he performed as he had to. I think he's quickly realizing the value of the QP setting and the House of Commons for certain things, including this morning's response to the ruling on tariffs. He gets to go in, he gets to say what he wants to say, not necessarily answer a question, but respond to a question or make a statement and leave.
Yeah. Right. Okay. How did he do, in your opinion, Neil?
Well, he got through it. It's his first question period, and, it's the first time he will be asked about not having a budget, not having an economic plan. Are there really any tariffs on U.S. goods coming into Canada? Will he repeal legislation that has handcuffed the Canadian economy? It's the first time he's been asked these questions, and it was a novel experience, I'm sure, for him. Let's see how he swallows this when it's the 40th time he's asked these questions or the 100th time he's asked these questions. Mr. Carney has shown that he can lose patience with questioners. We saw that during the Liberal leadership campaign. We saw that during the national federal election campaign. The 100th time Andrew Scheer asked him where the budget is. Let's see if Mr. Carney is still smiley and happy to regurgitate the same line over and over again. So he got through it. Did he do great? No, but he got through it, and that's what question period is sometimes.
Okay, so there is a report today. There's a First Minister's meeting coming up, Carney and all the premiers in person in Saskatoon. That's June 2nd. And at that meeting, the Prime Minister is going to present the premiers with, quote, broad outlines of legislation that will impose a 2-year approval process for major nation-building projects such as ports, critical mines, critical mineral mines, and trade corridors. Now, the same report in the Globe and Mail today says the New Democrats and Bloc are not going to play nice in the sandbox on this. But I do wonder if maybe the Liberals could count on the Conservatives for some support on something like this. What do you think, Chris Day?
Well, I mean, the Liberals are in a very enviable position, given their strong minority, that they have three dance partners that they can choose to two-step with or not, and they only need one. So I think you're right that there is a potential dance partner, depending on what comes out of the First Minister's meeting next week, in the Conservatives, if they're getting serious about resource development. In that case, it won't particularly matter what the Bloc and the NDP have to say, because they'll have the dance partner that they need.
Neil, what do you think, Neil?
I think it depends on the projects. Going off of question period yesterday and some other, long-standing conservative concerns. If one of the first 2 or 3 projects is an energy corridor to get Canadian energy products to a diverse set of markets, not just beholden to the United States, I can see the Conservatives getting on board with that. Given Mr. Carney's past being an environmentalist and sometimes radical green agenda guy, and hearing messages from his environment minister yesterday that energy superpower depends on energy being low cost, low risk, and low carbon, I don't know if that's going to be the first thing that Mr. Carney tries to get through this new improved process. So it'll be a case-by-case basis. If it meets the Conservatives' longstanding desires for economic growth in this country, I see it. If it doesn't, they won't.
Okay, we'll be right back.
You have questions.
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
I was setting that out to 1980s music aficionado Neil Brody today, who I'm sure
Mitsu.
Little Mitsu.
Mitsu is never out of place anywhere.
Very excited. Mr. Guilbeault, who of course is now the Minister of Canadian Identity, seems to be stuck in the 80s. He announced today the Canada Day lineup for the big Ottawa show for Canada Day. Wow, what a trip back in time this is. Sarah McLachlan, Tom Cochrane, Amanda Marshall, Blue Rodeo, Rock Voisin. You remember Rock Voisin? Helen Things You Do. Randy Bachman, yeah, and Mitsu, the great Mitsu. Bye-bye, Mon Cowboy. Bye-bye, Mon Gigolo. I hope they make a... I hope they make a I hope they make a commemorative CD just to capture that moment in time. Yeah, that is it.
I think there's a box set with all of those people on it already.
Probably is.
Probably is. 25th anniversary thing. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Mitsu's apparently still around, still doing gigs. God bless her. She's on tour. She's going to be playing a big concert on the Plains of Abraham and doing Canada Day. So who knew? Wow, there you go. How's that for a blast from the past? Okay, there's a report.
Pull that lineup together for the 150th anniversary of Canada. That Canada Day was kind of lame.
Look, I'm pretty sure that you could see that lineup at just about any country fair in the fall. So,
well, Sarah McLachlan fair. To be fair, Sarah McLachlan is a pretty big draw. So for sure.
There's a report today that Carney met with Harper. Now, neither side is commenting. We don't know what they talked about. What do you suppose they talked about, Neil? And how unusual would that be?
It's not unusual. Okay. We've seen Mr. Harper sit down with Mr. Chrétien a number of times. One of the things that your listeners will know, listening to your program, a number of panelists talk about this, is outside of the made-for-TV events like Question Period, media scrums, election campaigns, most politicians get along. So this isn't unusual to see. I would say that there was there's some helpful advice. Mr. Harper was Prime Minister for 10 years. There was some economic uncertainty while he was there. Mr. Harper had to work with two different styles of White House, Mr. Bush and Mr. Obama's White House. So I think there's a never-ending amount of advice that can be traded back and forth between the two, and I would expect that Mr. Harper probably pulled out some of his political impersonations. His impersonation of Brian Mulroney and Bill Clinton are quite good. So I suspect that was part of it too.
Okay, what do you think about that, Chris? Carney meets Harper.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are only 23 people who've done the job before Mark Carney, and only a handful of those folks are still with us. So, I think as a new PM, a new politician, it's very wise to seek the advice and counsel of the people that have done the job before, if not your immediate predecessor who you're trying to clean up from. But to Neil's point, the friendship now, as I understand it, is between Mr. Chrétien and Mr. Harper is actually quite an endearing characteristic of Canadian politics, right? That they can have private meetings, they can walk down the streets of Ottawa or wherever they happen to be at the same time, without protection, without big RCMP details, and go grab lunch somewhere or have a coffee and talk about things in private. That's a really interesting feature of Canadian politics, and I'm glad to see that tradition continuing.
Here's what they were talking about, okay, in my world. Hey, Mark, did you see what Trudeau was wearing at the throne speech? What's with the sneakers? Okay.
I haven't heard it, but I suspect in the last 10 years, Mr. Harper's developed a quite good Justin Trudeau impersonation. So I'm sure that may have raised its head during the discussion as well.
And Rob, Adidas makes a fine sneaker.
Well, I said yesterday, my wife asked me to buy her a pair of Adidas Gazelles for her birthday, that she had always wanted them. They just never go out of style. So I bought her a pair of its green Adidas Gazelle sneakers for her birthday. She loves them, but she wouldn't wear them if she wouldn't wear them to the throne speech, for crying out loud. Like, come on, that's just crazy.
I'm told that Mr. Trudeau has been wearing sneakers quite a bit recently to events like weddings and other things that he's been invited to in the last few weeks. So I have no idea what that's about. But I saw the photos, and who doesn't love a good sneaker?
Yeah, I guess there's a time and place for a good sneaker. Okay, like the justices of the Supreme Court of Canada are there, and they are just robed from head to toe. And there's the former Prime Minister, not long out of office, and the guy's wearing sneakers. For crying out.
If I was in a Supreme Court justice robe, to be fair, I'd be wearing sneakers as well.
Neil?
Maybe Run DMC was playing the after party.
Okay, we'll be right back. We'll talk a little bit about what's been happening in conservative circles these days. The campaign manager for the Liberals in the most recent election, Andrew Bevins, said the Conservatives didn't have a strategy problem. They had the right strategy, focused on the right issues, but what they had was a leader problem. Chris, what do you think of that claim?
I think that is prejudging and listening to her that the Conservative leader is himself doing right now. But it also sounds a bit like sore winning to me. Maybe that's an analysis, but I think that may be a premature assumption.
Premature assumption. Okay. What do you think, Neil?
Well, if anyone would know about leader problems, it's Bevin, who has worked for Ontario Liberal Premiers McGuinty and Wynne, who after 12 years in government left the Ontario Liberal Party in tatters. And he also worked for Justin Trudeau, who left office after the most spectacular decline in popularity in Canadian politics. So yeah, I trust Bevin when he says that. He knows it. He's lived it 3 times. Maybe it's, as Chris said, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. We'll see what Mr. Poilievre does in the 6, 8, 10 months that he's been given to listen to what's the aftermath of the election and see what comes out of it. But Mr. Bevin for sure is an expert on leader problems.
Okay. Nevertheless, though, I do see more conservative MPs are showing up on the cable news political talk shows. You know, they're putting more of the Poilievre team on display. People like Shiv Majumdar, for example, and Adam Chambers, like 2 super bright people. I think they should have been doing this long ago. That was just my opinion. But what do you think about this development? Neil, why don't you take that one?
Well, politics is a team sport. It's not golf. It's not tennis. It is hockey, baseball, or football. Mr. Poilievre decided for the last couple of years that the party would revolve around him. We didn't get to know his team that well. Incumbent parties like the Liberal Party in the last election have a ready-made team to sell to voters. So it's nice to see one of the early adjustments that the Conservative Party has made is to start highlighting the broader team publicly. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, me too, because I think one of the things was during the election campaign was who do I see in there as a minister of foreign affairs or a finance minister or a justice? Who are these people beyond Poilievre? Who is he going to surround himself with? And they never showcased any of their people, really. What do you think, Chris, on that one?
Well, I'll put cards on table. Shuv is one of a number of people I worked with when in government. He's a friend. He's a brilliant policy mind, and he's also an excellent communicator. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he's out now and doing the rounds, and I'm very pleased to see it. Yeah, I'm pleased to see it. I mean, when you're in the middle of a campaign, you've got to have your local candidates out doing local candidate things, like knocking on doors and such. And the leader puts at risk that opportunity, as we saw quite clearly in Carleton, to go out and be the salesperson nationally. But I do think that the Conservative team and the Liberal team, frankly, both have a very deep bench of strong communicators and smart people on each team. And showcasing those people helps guard against any potential leader fatigue and put them in the minds of voters that, there are, in fact, a group of people who are out with ideas that are credible and can sell, a vision of the country that people may want to get behind.
Okay, great to hear from both of you today. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Speak soon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot,
bye-bye.
Rob. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, Neil Brody, longtime Conservative strategist and commentator, and Chris Day, Senior Vice President at Hill and Knowlton. Talk back. Coming up right after the latest breaking news.
When a shopper places an order, you have one shot at winning them as a lifelong customer. I'm Al Coe, CEO of ShipStation. I'm obsessed with ShipStation being the most reliable and efficient way you can ship. At ShipStation, our promise is to make shipping easier for e-commerce business owners. We're focused on providing the most integrations with all the places you sell and automating manual tasks to make fulfillment easier for your team. We partner with all the major carriers to make sure you get the lowest possible rates because every dollar counts. So no matter what you're sending or where you're shipping to, ShipStation can get it there fast and keep your customers happy. See for yourself how ShipStation can reduce the time and effort you spend on order fulfillment. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talk Back. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today's topic is social mobility. Social mobility, what do we mean by that? We mean climbing the ladder. making something of yourself, becoming successful, whatever success looks like to you. That's what we're talking about when we talk about social mobility. Another fancy term for it would be intergenerational income mobility. It's this idea that if your parents are well off, well, then the chances are pretty good the children will be well off. And if the parents are not well off, well, then the chances are pretty good that the children won't be well off either. Now, obviously, there are going to be exceptions. We probably all know people who had well-off parents, but maybe the children didn't amount to much. As well, we probably know people who came from very modest means and went on to be incredibly successful. Today, though, we kind of want to focus on the big picture, the trend, and talk about this in more general terms, because this has actually come up from time to time over the last little while, this issue of social mobility and how gradually over the years it's actually been declining in Canada, generally speaking. It actually came up during the election campaign for a couple of days. The Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, was trying to make some hay with a report. He referenced a report from a government think tank. You may remember this. It was called Policy Horizons, and it painted a rather bleak picture of what could be ahead in the next 15 years if current trends persist. The report was called Social Mobility in Question, and it forecasted that by the year 2040, so 15 years from now, this idea of social mobility could be, not that it will be, but it could be a thing of the past. Social mobility. Let me read a little bit about what this report said. And again, I want to say that this think tank didn't say this is what would unfold, only that it could unfold in Canada. So imagine it. The year is 2040, 15 years from now, and this is what Canada could look like, according to this report. Quote, upward social mobility is almost unheard of in Canada by the year 2040. Quote, hardly anyone believes that they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts. Many worry about sliding down the social order, end quote. In other words, parents were middle class, had good jobs, owned homes, enjoyed pensions, retirement security, but 15 years from now, the idea their children will enjoy the same sort of lifestyle or enjoy a better standard of living, well, that would be almost unheard of. And in fact, there is concern people will actually lose ground. Instead of being middle class, they would fall down. They would be working class or even the working poor. And that this would be a common view. This is further down in this report on intergenerational wealth. 15 years from now, quote, people see inheritance as the only reliable way to get ahead. People see inheritance as the only reliable way to get ahead. Society, quote, increasingly resembles an aristocracy. Wealth and status passed down the generations. Family background, especially owning property, divides the haves from the have-nots, end quote. This is what we want to explore today with your help, and our phone lines are open right now at 1-833-668-2577. This is how we're kind of setting this up today. We have two statements, and we want to know which one you think is more accurate of life in Canada right now. Here's the first statement. In Canada, if you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's accurate? If you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. When you hear that, do you nod in agreement or do you shake your head? No. What do you think? And here's the second statement. In Canada, your standard of living is mostly based on the standard of living that your parents had. That's the second statement. In other words, if your parents were well off, you'll be well off. If your parents owned a home, you'll own a home. But if your parents weren't well off, chances are you're not going to be well off either. What would you say to that? How true is that? How accurate is that? Is it accurate at all? That you will not enjoy social mobility, that social mobility is almost unheard of. What's more accurate? That if you work hard, you can get ahead and have a better life than your parents had? Or hard work doesn't really matter. And you can work as hard as you want. But if you don't come from means, it's not going to matter. We just want to put this to the test today, explore it, kick it around for a while. But we can only do that if you give us a call, and we'd love to hear from you today on this one. Our phone lines are open right now. The call-in line is 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that or make your call a priority. It's the Thursday Talkback, and we're talking about trying to get ahead in this world, trying to climb that ladder, trying to enjoy a better life than our parents had. That is at the heart of the discussion around social mobility. Your call's next. I hope to hear from you today on this one. 1-833-668-2577. Lines available right now. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio. Happy to see jam phone lines on this. Very good. Kind of taking a flyer on this today, to be honest with you. Chris in Lethbridge. Thanks for calling, Chris. You're up first today. What's your opinion?
Well, I definitely strongly disagree. Coming from a family that definitely struggled day to day growing up, I use that as motivation to make sure that my kids didn't grow up in that same situation.
Okay, so just of these two statements, if you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. Would you say that's accurate?
100%.
100%? And you would disagree with this statement, your standard of living is mostly based on the standard of living your parents had? You would disagree with that?
I mean, statistically, it might be the case, but
okay,
which might be super unfortunate. I do disagree with it, even though that may not be the case.
Okay, I'm not. It's not that I'm taking one side or the other. I'm thinking about the trend here because the worrying trend, according to these researchers, is that increasingly in Canada, standard of living is based more than it used to be on the standard of living the parents had, and that's a worrying trend for some people, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think we definitely enjoy a lot more luxuries in life than, previous generations have had the ability to enjoy. Quality of life might be relevant to our parents' upbringing or our upbringing ourselves, but the way the world's transitioning, I'd like to think that we live a pretty good life despite what our earlier generations might have gone through.
Right. You still think hard work can pay off?
100%.
100%. And you can be whatever you want to be. You can climb the ladder, so to speak.
You betcha.
You betcha.
I moved out when I was 14 years old and lived on the streets and became a director of a very large, heavy civil construction company. So,
good for you.
Literally, it's how far you want to kick the ball.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, great to hear from you today. From Lethbridge to Calgary, Eric is up next. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Rob. You know what? I didn't grow up with anything, and I certainly did not inherit anything when my father passed, but I've done extremely well in life. But that being said, it's gotten a lot harder, and I think the past decade can be characterized here in Canada as a lost economic decade. I think that the reality is when economic growth stagnates, the opportunities that come with a rising tide are no longer there. And so, just by the law of averages, it does become harder for more people to achieve what previous generations have. I think you still can get ahead, but, the number of people that are getting ahead are certainly fewer when compared to 10, 15 years ago. And I think that a lot of our very brightest and best individuals are now making their way to the United States, to Europe, to other places, because the opportunities simply aren't here. And we have Justin Trudeau to thank for that. We've got his doubling down on basically stalling development in the resource sector here, higher taxes, all of these things kibosh growth. And at the same time, businesses have been forced to bring in cheap labor from overseas, resulting in job stagnation. And this is what we end up with. So no, we are not better off.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Do you think that this is a trend that is in place? Let me reference this report again. Family background, especially owning property, divides the haves from the have-nots. What do you think about that? You think that's a trend that's in place now?
It absolutely is. And whether you go to Toronto or Vancouver, if you are coming out of university and you want to buy your first condominium, let alone a house, I think I saw a report in Vancouver, and you've probably got access to it. 90% of first-time home buyers are relying on the bank of mom and dad in Greater Vancouver to purchase their first property. Now, if that
I do remember that. I can't remember the exact figure, but I believe the gift or to tap the loan from the bank of mom and dad, it's in excess of $100,000 in those cities, Toronto and Vancouver.
I mean, if that's where it's at right now, and it's just, a trend, I guess we would have multiple points over multiple years. That to me seems to be absolutely a trend. And, the only thing that's going to change that is if we get economic growth and prosperity trickling down. And it's not going to happen unless we make major changes, which I think Carney is trying to make. And my fingers are crossed that he does it, because there's a lot of anger here in Alberta.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll stop here, but we are off and running today. There is one line available there if you want to grab it, 1-833-668-2577. What's the more accurate statement? If you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be in Canada, or your standard of living is mostly based on the standard of living that your parents had. What's the more accurate statement? Marianne, up next. You're on the air, Marianne. Hi there. What's your opinion?
Well, I do not agree with the first statement. I was well educated and went into my chosen profession, which was music, and I've worked extremely hard. I'm now a senior citizen, and I can't say that I made any social movement above my parents because of my chosen profession. I have three children. The first married early, and because they didn't have children right away, they were able to save up and own property. The second one didn't marry until much later. He was 40 before he married, and he also didn't have children, worked really hard, but that was the first opportunity he had to save any money to buy property. And the third one also worked really hard, but wasn't in a position to buy property because she didn't have a partner for a long time. And despite having a good job in the legal profession, and was able to buy property because she received an inheritance from her grandmother. So I have solid proof that unless you have some opportunity to be married and to be able to save together and or have the right job, that's the only way you're going
or receiving a windfall
Yeah, possibly. It wasn't much of a windfall, but it was just enough for a down payment, right? And so, this is the only way you're going to get ahead. I know my grandson is going to be, he's the only grandchild, he's going to be well set after his parents pass away, but that's going to be a long time in his life, hopefully. He'll be in his 50s or 60s. And personal experience tells me it doesn't matter how hard you work if you're not in the right profession and life circumstances don't, give you some
go your way or what have you.
Yeah, it doesn't go your way. You're not going to get ahead in Canada.
Okay, very interesting, Marianne. Thank you. Thank you. 3 lines available there, folks, if you want to join the discussion. They were jammed right at the top of the show, but we have 3 there available now. Matthew in Shakespeare. Hello, Matthew.
Yes, hi, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Matthew. Thank you.
Good.
What's your opinion here?
Yeah, so my take on this is that you can work hard, you can get ahead, and that's very important. I don't think that the leadership we've had over the last 14 years has really helped at all. I've always gone by this statement: everything rises and falls under leadership.
Okay.
And we had a leader who basically did, I would say, whatever he wanted and did whatever he thought was good, and did certain things that until the people started, crying out and complaining to a deafening level, he continued on. And we're paying the price now for them. And it's going to take this next generation to really buckle down and realize with 2 feet and a heartbeat, you can work hard in this country and get ahead. There's a lot of these certain notions floating around that I think are toxic about, trying to basically just allow it to fall into your lap. And that's just wrong. And how we raise our kids and show them how to work and work hard is the way through it. So that's what I'm going with.
Very good. Thank you for sharing your opinion on this topic today. Really appreciate it. In Shakespeare, Ontario, 1-833-668-2577. 2 lines there if you want to grab one. In Milverton, Ontario, Mike is up next. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. How are you? What would you say?
Well, I would say that we are in the middle, but sliding toward number 2. But I'd like to kind of address the question behind the question, and that is upward mobility still possible? And I think it is, but there's a recipe to it. And the first step is having parents who manage to stay together at least until the kids are out of the home. Now, a kid doesn't have, you don't have control over that. That's kind of step 1. Step 2 is finish high school. Step 3, get a job. Step 4, don't get knocked up. Don't knock anybody up. Then step 5, get partnered up and manage to stay together for the rest of your lives. And that's the recipe to upward mobility. But there's some things that interfere with that. And the things that are setbacks would be getting divorced, getting sick, or getting hurt. Any of those things derail the ability for upward mobility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You're putting a lot of faith in the family unit staying together.
Absolutely.
Generationally. Right?
Yeah.
Generationally. Okay. Why is that, do you think?
Well, I mean, I've looked into this. I've kind of done the research, and this shows. And I recognize people can disagree, and that's fine. But they'd be disagreeing with the bulk of the research that basically supports that basic recipe. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's all there is to it.
Okay. But when I ask, is Canada still a meritocracy, you would generally say yes. And your chances are better if you follow the steps that you just outlined.
Yeah. I would say it is a meritocracy within some boundaries. But the key to it is really finding a partner who's able to work. And that's kind of the pathway. To try and do it on your own is really, really tough, especially to get into the housing market.
All right. Really interesting. Thank you so much. Such an interesting call. Mike in Milverton, Ontario, first-time caller. Halifax, Nova Scotia. Penny is up next. Hi, Penny.
Hi. It's my first time calling in.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I will go with number 1. I think if you work hard and set your goals, I think you can be anything you want to be. I started working for Neighbors when I was 11 years old. Went to nursing school when I was 16. Worked as a nurse for 46 years. Was divorced, had 2 boys, and I have achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. I have my own home. My boys each have their own home. And I think if you work hard enough, you can accomplish anything. And I think you have to have that mindset to get there.
Let me ask you this, Penny. The lifestyle or the standard of living that you have enjoyed because of your hard work, how does that compare to, say, the lifestyle or the standard of living that your parents had?
My parents, my father was in the Navy. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. And I would say that I am a lot further ahead than they were when I was a child. Like, you know, there wasn't a lot of money. The reason I started working when I was 11 is because I wanted to buy a pair of jeans. And I used to plant gardens and mow grass, and then I worked in a store, and then eventually went to nursing school. So, and then my mom, when my dad divorced my mom, she got a job housekeeping, making $600 a month. So, I mean, poor mom, right? So I'm way ahead, and both of my sisters are way ahead.
Okay.
Of what my parents would be.
And I'm sorry, you said you had how many children?
I have 2 boys.
2 boys. Do you think they will enjoy the same standard of living or even a better standard of living than you?
I think they will enjoy roughly the same. They're both in trade.
Roughly the same. Okay.
Yeah, because they're both in trades. They both work hard. They know there are things that they can do, you know, like in their spare time to earn more money if they want to. They can work overtime. I mean, tradespeople are in high demand. So,
yes.
Yeah, if they work hard, they can be anything they want to be.
Okay. Thank you, Penny, for calling.
Okay.
Yeah, from Halifax today. Yeah, great to hear from you. We're talking about social mobility, climbing up, climbing down, the social and economic ladder in Canada. What do you think is more true or truer? Is it more true or truer? If you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. That's what Penny thinks. Or your standard of living is mostly based on the standard of living that your parents had. If your parents were well off, you'll do okay. If not, maybe not. And it's that second part, is that trend that some researchers are concerned about. That's why we're asking this question today. Bill in Harriston, Ontario is our next caller. Hi, Bill.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good, Bill. What do you think of our topic today?
It's absolutely number one. If you put in the work, you can be whatever you want. You need the guidance, though, when you're young. Like, I was one child out of 6. I was the only one who went to college out of all 6 of us. And I ended up becoming a police officer for 30 years and then retire. I've been retired for 6 years already. But you have to put in the work. And like I said, the problem is if you don't have someone guiding you to say, hey, why don't you go to college? Or, hey, why don't you do this? Because sometimes we just think we're not good enough to do better. And if you're not taught that early on, you end up just taking the first thing that comes up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But my parents had nothing. My dad was a truck driver. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And we lived on very little. And by the time I was done high school, I thought, okay, I need to get a job because I can't do anything else. I'm not smart enough. But how I ended up doing it was a girlfriend of mine was picking her college courses. And I'm like, you're going to college? She's like, yeah, why don't you go to college? And it started from there. She had the book there. I picked a couple courses. The college called me and said, which one do you want? And then I was on my way and I was set. So I think that's the key. And the other gentleman was saying that just before me is you need that guidance and someone to push you and to realize you're good enough to be what you want.
Okay. Do you have children, Bill?
I do. Yeah, I have 2 daughters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how would you describe how they're doing compared to, say, how you did? Are they going to be better off than you were?
One is doing well. She's working at a law firm because she wanted to do better. She started it. Yeah, she started in a factory and then said, I want to do something better. And then took an online course, and now she's working for a lawyer. My other daughter, and this is part of the problem with some people, is that they don't have confidence, or they are afraid to be out in the world, and they don't like people enough, or something like that, and they don't have the confidence to do anything, and she's a little bit lazier, unfortunately.
Okay. Because kind of what we're getting at today is, can you make it on your own, on your hard work alone, or do you kind of need to be set up by your parents for success?
No, you can make your hard work on your own. I did that from the start. When I decided to go to college, I said, how am I going to pay for it? I have no money except if I get another job. But what I did is I applied for a loan. Somebody said, you can get a student loan. You can get this. So I did. I wrote a letter to them and told them my situation, how I was one of 6 kids and we didn't have money. My parents just split up, and I got the student loan, and I did it all on my own. Like, it can be done. We just can't be afraid of it. Nobody wakes up being born a doctor. Nobody wakes up being born a nurse or, anything. You work for it. You can't grow up.
I'm glad to hear that is the prevailing opinion today. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Great call. Nelson in Nova Scotia up next. Nelson, hi there. You're on the air. What's your opinion here?
Well, hello,
Nelson?
Rob.
Hi,
thank
Nelson.
you very much. It's a real pleasure to be on your show.
Well, my pleasure taking your call.
One of the themes I'm hearing is people saying, when I. I'm in my 60s now, late 60s, and those opportunities were there for me, but not for the young kids today. They're not there. One of the big drawbacks, unfortunately, is the immigration. Right here in the province now, with school ending and university ending, many of the students now can't find work. That's one of the very unfortunate things. They can't find work, and they're trying to pay their way through university. And unfortunately, unless you have somebody with some money, you're just not going to make it. That's just kind of how it is today. In Nova Scotia, unfortunately, we're one of the highest tax province in the country with the lowest wages. So that is a huge albatross around people's neck today.
Okay. So I'm circling back to what was in this report. Again, this is just, these researchers in Ottawa are not saying this is what's going to happen, but it could happen by the year 2040. Wealth and status passed down the generations. Family background, especially owning property, divides the haves from the have-nots. Do you think that is a trend that's in place in Canada?
Absolutely. That is absolutely the way we're going now. In this province, we used to have a lot of middle class, but now it's getting right down to the rich and the poor. And that is it, because we have welders, plumbers, electricians, you name it. They can't afford a house. And when I was growing up, all those people were the ones that were buying homes. And myself, I was fortunate enough to work for Metro Transit here in the city, and I did very well, was able to afford a home. But unfortunately today, those people can't. The inflation has just taken off to a degree where the money we used to make.
So are you telling me if you're a bus operator in Halifax now, like say you're 35 years old, you're a bus operator in Halifax now, you can't buy a house in Halifax on a bus operator's salary anymore?
Oh, no. No, we're well under it. Unfortunately, our housing is like Ontario and Vancouver, Toronto and Vancouver now.
Yeah, it's gone wild,
and
right?
we just don't make the wage down here. Our operators are around $28 to $30 an hour here, and that just doesn't cut it anymore.
Okay. You're in the minority opinion today, Nelson. You realize that?
Yeah, I do, but I think these people are talking about when they grew up. It's a whole different world today than when they grew up. I was able to come from nothing myself. And I was very fortunate, but today you're really going to need help if you're going to make it today. And in the future, if it continues this way, you're absolutely going to need help.
Okay, thank you, Nelson. Got to run. We'll wrap it up there. Chris in Halifax is up next, sharing his opinion on trends in social mobility. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Rob. How you doing today?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Rob, just offer you a little different perspective here.
Sure.
I'm a business owner, and I hire multiple staff, and I have some staff that have come on board with me, and they've been with me for many years, and they've maybe come to this country with nothing, and I've watched them build lives. I've watched them go from sharing apartments to buying homes to putting their kids into college, and it definitely boils down to their work ethic and how much they're willing to put forward. And Rob, I think we've lost a little bit of that work ethic. So I think that definitely has a big play in it.
Okay. So this idea in Canada, if you work hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. You still think that's true?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, I came from a very middle of the road family. My father worked 7 days a week. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. I graduated and went out west and did my thing, and I came back and like I said, now I'm a business owner, and I've worked my way up. And then I see my staff do the same thing, and I see them, like I said, arrive with almost nothing, just the clothes on their back and a little bit of money in the bank. And they've one of my staff members just purchased a $400,000 home here, and 3 years ago he was sharing an apartment with some friends. So it's possible, and I don't think that's lost right yet. It's shrinking. Maybe the opportunities are shrinking, but I think if you're willing to grind it out and kind of get it done, it's achievable.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Yep, great to hear your opinion. First-time caller in High River, Alberta is Dave. You're on the air, Dave. Hi, Dave.
Hey, how's it going, Rob?
I'm great, Dave. What would you say?
I would say it's great. Actually, I agree with, hard work. If you put your head down, butt up, you should be able to achieve something. I came from basically nothing, I guess. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked a full-time job, but he also had, little things on the side, fixing up small engines and things like that. Myself, I guess the school of hard knocks. I quit in grade 11. I'm in the trades. I'm a general contractor, and I find that, we had struggles, but you just do what you have to do. And, I guess by putting your head down, butt up, one day you lift your head up and go, holy crap, look at what I got. I've achieved something. I've moved.
Let me ask you this, Dave.
Yeah.
Just because we're a little tight on time, we only have like a minute left. When you look around at your life now, how does that compare to your parents' life?
I would say I'm better off.
You would say you're better off. Do you have kids?
Yes, I do. I have 4 kids.
Do you think they'll be better off than you were?
Well, I can tell you they're adults, and the 3 that are doing very well, I do believe that they're going to raise their families probably better than I was able to raise them. The other one, it's not that he hasn't done well. He just, I guess, isn't so good with his money. And, I guess my thoughts were, I have to teach them work ethic. I have to make them accountable. When you want something, I'll help you out with that. I don't even mind giving you the money, but you got to pay me back. And better yet, I've even got a task for you you can earn some money.
Okay. Great stuff. Glad we could fit you in, Dave. Thank you. Just before the news at the top of the hour, it's been a very busy first hour. Full hour just ahead, right after the latest breaking news, bringing you up to date on everything that's happening today in the news. And then we're right back talking about social mobility. That's our topic today. Is Canada a meritocracy? Canada a meritocracy? This is Talkback News Radio.
If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. Great to be with you again today. I'm Rob Snow. The topic of the day, social mobility, climbing up, falling down the social and economic ladder in Canada. Talking about Canada being a meritocracy, trying to get ahead in this country all on your own, on merit alone, with your own hard work. Is that still possible? Or do you need to be set up for success? Do you need to be set up for success? And we're talking about kind of big picture from 10,000 feet up. And we're talking about this today because there's data that suggests the big picture trend is Canada is gradually becoming less of a meritocracy, and more that someone's standard of living is increasingly going to be based on the standard of living that their parents enjoyed. And in fact, if anything, the trend may be moving in the wrong direction. And even instead of people enjoying the same or better standard of living than their parents had, there is evidence they may be falling down the social mobility ladder, that they may actually be worse off than their parents were. Always going to be exceptions, of course. We're talking big picture data, StatsCan data. Let's get right back to the phone. Some people have been waiting a while. Robert in Calgary. Hi, Robert.
Hello.
Hi, Robert. What would you say?
Yes, I think there's a minor problem the way you've worded your premises, because you've left out something that's actually more important than almost anything else.
What's that?
And well, in number one, you're saying if you work hard, you can get ahead. I've known lots of people that worked hard that never got ahead. And
Sure.
the difference was they didn't learn money management. You've got to combine money management skills with the hard work. And when
Okay.
those come together, people get ahead.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
in your
Fair enough.
second later part, where you say a lot of people aren't quite as off as their parents. Well, where do most people get their money management skills? They learn it from their parents, mostly by observing. There aren't classes. And if you follow the same money management skills your parents had, you're probably going to end up in the same standard of living. And if times are a little tougher, as some of this is indicating, then you might end up a little bit behind. But it still comes back to, what do you do with the money once you get it? If you don't have those skills, you're not getting ahead.
Okay. Very good point, sir.
And
Yeah,
we
your
don't
point
teach
is
them in
well
schools.
taken. Well, we're starting to, at least in the province of Ontario, they're introducing it into the curriculum. I believe it's this fall. They're starting to teach, the course is going to be financial literacy. They're going to start teaching that.
Well, that's what they need to do, because I think everything actually evolves around that. You can have lots of money. Look how many people win a lottery, get a lot of money, and they're broke in a year.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I bet you it was a great year, though.
Yeah, except for the guy that won the very first 649 up in Edmonton. He was, I won't mention anything about his
I don't know
background,
that story.
other than he used the money to go out and buy a condo and then forgot where it was.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Wow.
Quite literally, that happened.
Wow. Holy smokes. Oh, to be so lucky, I guess. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Good to hear from you. I really appreciate your call, Robert. It is a valid point that you make. Let's go to Kitchener, Ontario. Candace, thank you for waiting, Candace. You're up next.
Hi. Yeah, I think a lot of your callers are a little out of touch.
Out of touch. Okay.
Yeah, and like it is. There's no way. Like my husband and I aren't even close to what my parents were, like with their comfort level, and that's even with being able to get a house from like inheritance. I had to, buy half from my sister. But the point is, like, they bought the house 30 years ago in Kitchener. It's a bungalow, and it was $140,000. At the price in 2011, it was $700,000. So now it's like a $900,000 house. There's no way that we could have afforded this house or even a smaller home with like both of our incomes, and we are hard workers. I had to change my career and help my dad when he was ill, but even still, I think it's so much harder now. The cost of everything is so much more than it was for my parents or even their parents. And this idea that it's as easy as it was before, as your callers are saying, it's not even close.
Okay. Do you think you kind of have to now be, the way I put it, is set up for success? You really need help?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have
And,
children
like,
of your own? Do you have children of
I
your own?
chose to not have children.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I don't know how I would afford children. And like, I have a lot of friends who have children who are struggling because everything is just so expensive, right? And they're making those choices like, do I fix the car or do I get groceries?
Okay. So if I say Canada's a meritocracy, what would you say?
I would say it's less and less. I
Less
agree
and
that
less.
It's less and less, yeah.
Okay.
And
You would. Okay.
Yeah, you can work hard, but that doesn't mean it's going to equal your ability to get a home, even if you save, right? Like, there's so many things that need to align for you to get that job that you can afford a house nowadays. And that's why we have so many homeless.
Right.
Most people are one paycheck.
One paycheck away. One paycheck away.
that,
Yeah, we've heard that. Yeah, absolutely.
In those encampments, like when with that's the reality for a majority of people, right? A lot of your callers, based on they're saying they have adult children, so they are looking at it with completely different eyes, right? Like, their children were set up because they're like probably older than myself, right? And now I'm looking at people who are my counterparts, and there's the odd ones who are got lucky, got those good jobs, and have a home and children and able to afford that without struggling. But majority of the people I know are struggling, right? And my parents were, I would say, middle class. They had a cottage and were able to afford those things.
Wow. Okay, Candace, thank you. Thank you very much for your call. I really appreciate it. Be right back on Talkback. Social mobility, or the fancy term is intergenerational income mobility. StatsCan has looked at this, says it's gradually been on the decline in Canada. I don't want to get all wonky on you and dig into the numbers and throw all kinds of numbers at you, but that was the conclusion from a report that StatsCan did on it. But I want to know what you think. Michelle in Calgary. Hi, Michelle. You're on the air. What's your opinion?
Hi,
here?
Rob.
Hi, Michelle.
I'm going to come at this from the angle of a younger person. I'm 25. Okay. I'm a college graduate, and I work full time.
Okay.
The big thing that I have noticed that I think makes the difference is debt at this moment in time. It is so much easier, from what I've heard, to get into debt now than it has been in the past, especially, and it's a lot harder to get out of the debt as well.
Okay.
And I think that the second point that you have is a lot more realistic right now, because what I found with a lot of my peers and people my age is that you need a good support network to be able to survive properly. And whether that's financial, emotional, whatever, if you don't have that support network, it does not matter how hard you work, you're going to have a hard time.
Okay. Would you say, let me ask you this, would you say that where you are right now, 25-year-old working woman, working full-time, do you think that you are on the path to enjoy a better standard of living than your parents had, about the same? Are you going to be worse? What would you say?
Honestly, at this point, I feel like I'm going to be worse. At this point, my parents were married. They were already planning on having kids. They were done with school. My dad was working full-time and making good money. They were living out in Vancouver, and they were able to afford it. If I thought about living in Vancouver, I think I would cry just because of the cost of it all. At this point, I seriously don't know if I'll ever be able to afford a home, and I don't think it'll matter if I stay in Calgary or not.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
And that's
okay.
a partner who also works full time, and we make $20-some an hour, but our rent costs about half of what we make in a month. It's just, when you think about the level of expenses right now, like I said, it doesn't matter how hard you work. If you aren't able to afford the cost of living, you're not going to be able to get out of the hole.
Okay. Michelle, thank you for your call. Yeah, good to hear from you today. Staying in Calgary, Erica up next on Talkback. Hi, Erica.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Erica.
Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Perfect. I can hear you. So
Good.
I have to agree with the last caller. So I have a doctorate of education. I've worked incredibly hard all my life, and I have a business certificate. So I have lots of education. I've worked. I'm now in my 50s, and I can't find work. So thank God, I had parents that worked very hard, and I had savings. So I'd have to go with number 2.
You have to go with number 2. That your standard of living is mostly based on the standard of living your parents had.
All right.
Yes?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
You would say the standard of living is mostly based on the standard of living that your parents had. Is that what you would say?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You're telling me you have a PhD in education?
Yeah, a doctor of education. I didn't go the professor route. And I can't tell you, Rob, how many jobs have been rejected. You have to have that network for sure. It's who you know here in Calgary anyways. And I'm an incredibly hard worker, and I can't get a job at Canadian Tire. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Yeah,
No.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank God I have savings. You know, I was able to get into the housing market when I was younger, when I was working full time. But yeah, now I could be living on the streets if it, you know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's look at it this way. If I said Canada is becoming less of a meritocracy than it was before, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
You would.
I can't count the number of people who, their companies based on nepotism. I've looked at, you know, in getting ahead for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Thank you, Erica. We'll stop here.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So once more, all the lines are free. Every single one of them. 1-833-668-2577. We've been talking about social mobility, climbing the economic ladder in Canada or falling down the economic ladder in Canada. Is Canada a meritocracy? Can you get ahead in the country on merit alone with your own hard work, you know, blood, sweat, and tears? Or do you kind of need to be set up for success? I find this to be such an interesting question. And again, we're speaking in broad terms, a big picture. 10,000 feet up. What is the trend in this country right now? Because as I say, we're all going to know people who came from, maybe you're one of them, came from modest means and have done very well for themselves. And we're going to know people who have been set up to succeed. And we're going to know people who were set up to succeed and given every opportunity to succeed, but for one reason or another, it didn't work out. And we're all going to know people who had successful parents and went on to enjoy success themselves. I know people in all of those circumstances. A friend of mine from high school, a good friend of mine from high school, graduated from high school, took a 2-year trade, went out to Alberta. Guy was probably 21 years old at the time. He founded a company in northern Alberta that was somehow involved in, I don't know what, it was like gauges for pipes and stuff. I'm telling you, this guy built this company, sold it for $1 gazillion, and he retired before he was 50. Retired. Like done working. Fabulously wealthy. And the guy's father was a coal miner. I also knew a guy whose father was very rich. He inherited his father's company, and now he's very rich. And I also knew a guy whose father was a blue-collar tradesman who went on to have a very successful career in business, made millions of dollars, and his son, well, to be quite frank, was kind of a washout. We all know people like this, What we're talking about today is what the big picture trend says is happening in this country. Because the data could raise alarm bells, because the trend suggests that Canada is gradually becoming less a meritocracy. And someone's standard of living is increasingly based on the standard of living that their parents enjoyed. While I wait for some calls, StatsCan has looked into this. It doesn't call it social mobility. It calls it intergenerational income mobility. And it has concluded it's been declining over the years in Canada. For example, this is the data wonk, okay? Let's say a child born to parents who were in the lowest 20% of income households in Canada, if they were born in the mid-60s, that the chances that that child would still be in the lowest 20% of income households later in life was 27%. But for someone born in a low-income household in the early 80s, the chances that they would still be a low-income household when they grew up increased to 32%. That is the trend. A blunter, maybe even a crude way to say it would be more of the poor stayed poor. They didn't get ahead. That same report says only 10% of Canadians born into the lowest income households rose to be included into the highest income households by the time they became adults. Only 10%. This same report says that if you're in the top, you were born into a household in the top 20% of households in Canada, the odds were pretty good, not a sure thing, but pretty good. You would remain in the top 20% of income households in Canada, 35%, and just 13% slipped from the top 20% down to the bottom 20%. You get what I'm saying here? So StatsCan concluded what all of it means is that social mobility has actually been declining over time, which is obviously not a good thing. Because it should be the goal of every government, for example, to put policies in place that will make it easier for the next generation to be better off than the previous generation. Who doesn't want our children to have better lives than we did? And therefore it hits on all the hot button issues that dominate the political discussion these days. Housing affordability, creating good career jobs instead of gig jobs. Is our education system training young people, setting young people up so they can succeed in the modern workforce? All of these things. And if a trend like this persists, it can fuel generational resentment. You know, things like, okay, boomer. How many times have you, okay, boomer? You know, the boomers, they have it all. They're keeping it all. And poor Gen Z, they get to pay all the bills of the boomers and at the same time won't enjoy nearly the same standard of living that the boomers did. This is what we're talking about today. 1-833-668-2577. Grant is on the line in Alberta. Hello, Grant.
Hello.
Hi, Grant. How are you?
Good, thanks.
That's good. What would you say, Grant? What's your opinion here?
Well, I'm going to base my I'm going to base it on my daughter, who's in her early 20s, and what it means for her. You know, I have a house. I'm retired, just recently retired. I have a house paid for. Pretty much everything's paid for. We helped my daughter get through a secondary education. She got a job, and within a year, her job was outsourced to immigration. Lower wages, government-funded support for these immigration. And the government support, where for the people who are, you know, the 18 to 25 range people, they don't have really a lot of government support, and they have to rely on their parents. So I would say if you're generationally poor, you don't have the support of your parents to help you with the costs nowadays of living on your own, paying for your groceries and going to school. And I really think it's all based on cost of living and
Okay.
the government's desire to try to somehow increase GDP by bringing in too many immigrants. As much as I believe we're all immigrants from Canada, I really feel the government's let us down in so many ways. The wages haven't gone up, the cost of living's gone up, and the support for immigrants versus support for Canadians born here is pretty lopsided.
Okay, fair enough, Grant. Thank you for your opinion. We'll be right back at 1-833-668-2577 if you want to jump in here in the home stretch of the Thursday Talkback. I'm Rob Snow on News Radio. John is up next in Calgary. Thanks for calling, John. You're on the air. Love to know your opinion on this. Yeah, I'm fine, John. What do you think?
I think you're asking a really complicated problem, Rob, and the reason it's not being solved is because it's really hard for politicians to take some bad news. We are going the way of the US, and it means that you're not going to live your dreams. People are going to get poorer. The rich are going to get richer, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
Okay.
But if we start with anybody can be whatever they want, well, it's not really true, is it? And we're starting from a position of not really telling young people how hard life is going to be, and that you can't be a rocket scientist. There's always the exception, but it's not likely. So it starts from a point of education. We've got to teach people, what life is really going to be like. And to that extent, we need to make changes to the education system. Teach tenacity, teach courage, teach managing finances. Everything else is good, but education can never keep up with the economy. So I'd rather see education be changed to, match the skills that you need regardless of the circumstances you find yourself in. And unfortunately, people do become a function of their parents because it's the standard that it's your expectations. And so it should be no surprise to us that people who grow up with parents with no education, with no jobs per se, equally have no expectation of either themselves, and their parents aren't particularly pushing for it. So how do we solve this, Rob?
Yes, I guess if I could just jump in there, I hate to interrupt you, but the trend would suggest, low-income parents. Well, it used to be more common that their children would not be low income, that they would become, middle class, or, in rare circumstances, climb to what they call the highest quintile of income in Canada. But now, gradually, that's less the case than it used to be. Doesn't happen as often as it used to. And that's a worrying trend, is it not?
It's a trend that we need to look at, yes. Worrying, I don't know.
Okay.
Why is that happening, right? I mean,
why is that happening? Sure.
It's a combination of global economics. Jobs are flowing to lower cost locations. People will work for less. It's a growing difference between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor, and we're going to see that it's going to get harder to jump out of the group you're in unless we change education. I would say exactly the evidence we see from the US, and if we're 20 years behind the US, unless we do something fundamental about it, such as my example would be education, we're in a whole heap of trouble.
Okay, and what would you do with education when you say we've got to change education? What needs to change about it?
I think the philosophy of moving away from subject-based education to information-based education. In other words, I want people to learn skills earlier rather than subjects. I want people to learn how to run a budget, where to find information, how to have courage in your life, learn how to cook. So not everybody's on Skip or whatever the delivery thing is.
Right. Okay.
I think we should be a merit-based, skills-based education that is going to help regardless of your job circumstances.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Good to hear from you today. Appreciate the call. We'll stop here. We'll stop a little bit early, and that'll give us more time with our caller next. Sarah in Calgary, you're up next, Sarah, on this topic of social mobility. What's your opinion?
Hello, Rob.
I think a few things. So I'm a millennial. I'd say I'm like a middle class millennial. And I would say in a few years, it won't necessarily be on a decline because we have so much access to information and education right at our fingertips. And there's so much more opportunities being created that even we ourselves are creating. I know like there's a lot of side hustles and businesses being started. And I think our age group is always looking for the next opportunity to get ahead. And I think we're really building that up and setting that stage up for our kids and the next generation. So I think it will kind of change as the years go on. And also too, like looking back, both my husband and I talk about it, I feel like it's really easy to set, for middle class, to set your kids up for success. And it would have been easy for our parents to do, to, start investing earlier, just small amounts each month and having that kind of grow from there. But you don't know what you don't know. So with our age, we have so much information that we can access so quickly. I think things will turn around.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Great call. Great call.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Some might say, well, to some extent, the system has always been rigged. A child of the Irving family or the Thompson family or the Sobey family or the Desmarais family or the Richardson family, of course, they're always going to be okay. And the children of the Bridle Path in Toronto or Rockcliffe Park in Ottawa, name your high-end neighborhood in any big Canadian city where the streets are lined with the mansions of the old money elite, they'll always be better off than us sending their children to Upper Canada College or Ridley or Ashbury and off to some elite university somewhere. Of course, we're never going to have to worry about those people. They'll be just fine. What we've been asking today is this true in Canada? That if someone studies hard enough and works hard enough, they can rise through the ranks. They can climb that ladder. Maybe someday even live in one of those nice neighborhoods and send their own children to Upper Canada College or some other fancy private school. Or are those days over? The data is suggesting social mobility is declining in Canada. Not that it's been eliminated, but it is a worrying trend nonetheless. I think that's why when this report came out during the election campaign from this government think tank, it generated so many headlines at the time, because I think it reinforced an impression that a lot of Canadians have about Canadian society right now. And again, this think tank was just making predictions, game planning what things could look like in the year 2040. Not what things will look like, but what they could look like by the year 2040 if trends hold, and policymakers in Ottawa should be thinking about this stuff. And one of the things that it wrote was that by the year 2040, upward social mobility, the very idea that based on your own hard work, you will get ahead in life, you will have a better life than your parents. This report said that would be unheard of in Canada by the year 2040, just 15 years from now. And I think some people read that and they thought, well, holy smokes, that's kind of bleak. Again, I quote from the report. In 2040, hardly anyone believes they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts. People see inheritance as the only reliable way to get ahead, and society increasingly resembles an aristocracy. Wealth and status passed down the generations. Family background, especially owning property, divides the haves from the have-nots. Again, just a possibility, not a certainty. But I think a lot of people keyed in on this idea of inheritance, and that the only way young people will ever get ahead is if they get a leg up, if they inherit some money from their parents, and that if they're not in line for an inheritance, it's going to be very hard for them to get ahead in life. I think a lot of young people right now might say, well, that's not something that might happen in 2040. That's reality in the here and now. I'm Rob Snow. We will be back tomorrow, me and David, with the Friday Free-for-All talk back. So that's always A lot of fun adventures in call-in radio. We'll follow your lead tomorrow, whatever happens to be on your mind. We can pick up on this topic or anything else that's in the news or not. The latest breaking news is coming up next. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Life can be chaotic. If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment add to the chaos. Use ShipStation instead. With ShipStation, you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again. Whether you're running a business out of your garage or you have multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your business's growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating repetitive tasks. Plus, you'll save money with the best shipping rates from global carriers. ShipStation's industry-leading features help you deliver a better customer experience. They'll get accurate and faster shipments along with automated tracking updates with your branding. And with up to 88% off UPS and USPS rates and up to 90% off FedEx rates, ShipStation is the fastest and most affordable way to ship. Calm the chaos. Switch to ShipStation today. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.